tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. So this is session 2 of the Sutta studies for the Rains Retreat 2024. Working through the challenges of spiritual practice. And I'll just say, maybe in general, first of all, that there's two general kinds of challenges we face. There is, of course, the practical challenges of developing the spiritual exercises. The Buddha, one of the categories the Buddha used was referring to the 5 hindrances, which I'll go into a bit more detail as they arise. Then there is what I would call existential challenges, just the challenges of living in the world, trying to be happy in an imperfect world. And of course, everybody faces existential challenges, but there's only a few special people, who realize that the only solution to the existential challenges is a spiritual one. Most people, I was just thinking of the analogy the Buddha used recently, just as I came down here. The Buddha said that there's only a few people who are the liberation or nibbana is referred to as the further shore. It's only a few people who are looking for a way to cross the shore. The rest of the people run up and down the slope on this shore, run up and down through sensuality and challenges, and don't realize they can only be saved by crossing the river to the further shore. So hopefully we're some of the chosen people. But it's and this is a kind of an example. The Buddha was a primary example of this process in a way, because he came across his own spiritual existential challenges. These were in the kind of Buddhist tradition or Buddhist culture. They are kind of presented as the story of the very wealthy young man living a sheltered life, and suddenly he's exposed to sickness, old age, and death, and he gets a bit of a shock. I mean, I would just say that's a kind of a allegorical example of each one of us growing up. As we grow up, of course, we're exposed to the innocent child is exposed to sickness, to death, to old age. My grandmother got old. My grandmother died when I was younger, and suddenly, for sometimes it kind of wakes us up a little bit more. Huh? What is this about? What's the meaning of all this? And then we usually forget about it. Try to forget about it. Distract ourselves with all kinds of different things, entertainments and amusements and whatever. But some people still retain this lesson somehow. There's something there, and maybe we come across a spiritual solution. There was a 4th messenger, they say in the scripture, in the commentaries anyway. The 4th messenger was the religious person. The Buddha saw these, apparently the Buddha-to-be saw these an old person, a sick person, dead corpse. What's a mystery? What is it? What is it? And all they could answer was, well, that's life. But then he saw a religious mendicant. Oh, that's the solution, to find a religious solution to it. It's the only way you can find a solution, actually. So then the Buddha set off on his journey. So I think if you take the Buddha as an example, as a symbol of either awakening, or somebody who was enlightened, or at least a figure of somebody who was very wise, that we can learn from, then maybe learning from his example can be helpful. So the first example I would say is that I have this kind of special project in my life. You know, people have said, even historians say, oh, the Buddha was a prince. No, he was not a prince. It was not, he came from a tribe called the Sakyans in northern India or the foothills of the Himalayas. And they were a tribal republic. Right, Dewey? A tribal republic? Yes. So the Buddha was possibly the son of the tribal chief. There was a democratic organization, democratic for those times, you know. I don't know what exactly the criteria was. Probably it was the head of each family. The male head of each family met together in an assembly and elected the chief, you see. And this is not only important for the Sangha, but also as a basis for spiritual practice. Because when the Buddha came in to set up the Sangha, he chose a republican model, a democratic model. So each one of us has one vote, technically. For the most senior monk to the most junior has one vote in our assembly. We very rarely vote, actually. It's usually by silent agreement. Of course, it is a little bit moderated by the respect for elders, natural respect for elders. And so even though we both have one vote, because I'm so senior and so wise and experienced, and I've got the gift of the gab, so the senior people tend to have a bit more of a weighted view in the democratic processes of the Sangha. And this goes on to spiritual practice, I would say, too, because the democratic model is opposed to the authoritarian one, where you have a king. The king is the boss, or some kind of elected ruler or a dictator, and then everybody else has no more say. It inclines to powerlessness, in other words, for everybody else. This person is the one who makes all the decisions, and so what can you do? You can argue if you want, but they have the power. So the same with spiritual practice. We all are equal in spiritual practice. We all have to do this for ourselves. It's a very, very personal thing. Even though the Buddha is the teacher, Buddha is not the leader. He isn't the superhero who's going to enlighten us. The Buddha can enlighten us. We have to enlighten ourselves, to do the work ourselves. And when I was staying with Ajahn Chah one time, and he said to me, he just turned to me one day and he said, I can't give you any wisdom. All I can give you is patience. And what? I come all this way from Canada to get wise, or enlightened preferably, but at least wise, and all they can give me is patience. A poor substitute, isn't it? I can be patient in Vancouver, but however, what I realized was each person has to be enlightened for themselves, and real wisdom is knowing yourself. So he can't know me. Only I have the potential to know myself. But he can give me the patience and encouragement to abide with the practices, keep with it through all the challenges that I can find out for myself. So we each have to follow this path for ourselves individually. The second example of the Buddha, I would say, which is important, is when he was seeking for his experience of enlightenment. There's two different processes here. First of all, he devoted himself to the traditional practices. At that time in India, there was already a very highly evolved culture with spiritual development too. There was lots of yogis and lots of learned Brahmins and all kinds of different truth seekers, spiritual seekers. And the Buddha was in that milieu, so he went off and found a teacher first. And the first two teachers he had taught him the advanced meditation exercises. very, very highly advanced up to the eighth absorption, and he was very successful. And but then he himself experienced, but oh, this is not it. This is not it yet. It's not the final solution. It's not the real. This is not Nibbana as I understand it. So he set off on his own inquiry, his own spiritual search, if you like. Oh, he did the ascetic practices first, meditation first, and ascetic practices, which were also quite common in India at the time. But he didn't find them satisfactory. So he began to reconsider, which is the way to practice now? So he reflected himself, went back to his original seeking was based on this question: what is the cause of suffering? So then he investigated, what is the cause of suffering? And he'd already had this very advanced meditation, probably more advanced than we'll ever get, but anyway, that's why it took us so little time, I guess. We're a little bit slower. But he already had a very, very deep grounding in traditional spiritual practices. And then he began to investigate in his own way, experiment, if you like. That's when he discovered the dependent origination. He followed it back from, he asked the question, what's the cause of suffering? The cause of suffering is becoming. The cause of becoming is grasping, is craving, is all the way back to the very source in ignorance. It's ignorance is the cause. Then he was enlightened. That was in one sentence. Took him all night though, And then 6 years preliminary practices too. But I think the point of this is that each one of us, when we're developing spiritual practice, is very helpful to develop the formal exercises first. Have a good grounding in the formal exercises, as the Buddha explained, many of them. It gives a whole range of different approaches, suiting different temperaments of people. But ultimately, in the end, we have to find out for ourselves. We all have general obstructions or hindrances. We all have greed, aversion, delusion, for example. But we each personally have our own brand of greed, aversion, delusion. So the Buddha gives us the exercises which relate to, you say, greed, aversion, delusion in the general sense. But now you have to personalize it. You have to find how to apply those particular spiritual exercises to your own life, to your own experiences. So don't just believe only in what the Buddha is saying. Take you a very, very long way, I would say. But unless we personalize it to our own particular examples of challenges, for example, then we're never going to really get down to the real root of them. So there's that part of it. And developing the traditional exercises. I mean, there's a whole range of different exercises you can develop. I mentioned 40 meditation themes, as well as developing the virtues, etc. Patience and generosity, and it's it basically, the more those are firmly established, then the easier it is to feel confident when you begin to experiment and checking out other approaches. The third example of the Buddha, I would say, is that I mentioned somewhat already that when the Buddha was a night of awakening, sometimes they have this image of the Buddha killing Mara. Mara was the personification of death and evil and all kinds of negative things. And the Buddha was fighting the armies of Mara. But the Buddha didn't kill Mara. Ironically enough, the Buddha didn't kill Mara. Mara was there all the time for the Buddha's life, right to the very end. Mara was still there. But the Buddha used, you can say, he used the wisdom. His all these virtues, the 10 paramitas, the Buddha recognized, oh, I see you, Mara, I know you. And then when Mara was known, that knowing, The word Buddha means the one who knows Mara, knows all these different challenges. He doesn't believe that they're things. The Buddha saw right through them, and then Mara disappeared. Couldn't hide anymore. In other words, it's the unconscious things, you can say, that are the real challenges. Once you see those things, see this the whole range of unconscious things, you can say these hindrances, these obstructions, these challenges, they have basis in the very, very deep levels of our unconscious. It's actually the kind of how the sense of self was developed, sense of self developing, and initially it develops unconsciously, at an unconscious level. It takes a while before the brain develops enough ability for self-consciousness, to have self-consciousness. Otherwise, most of it is unconscious. Yeah. But once we're aware of that, that's where it comes from, that's what it is. Then it's no more a challenge, obstruction, a hindrance. I don't know how many times people have asked me, how to get rid of my anger. No, it's not going to work. Trying to get rid of your anger is already anger. How do I get rid of my greed? Because, I crave nibbana. Yeah, trying to get rid of greed is craving nibbana. You still got craving. You're not out of the loop yet. Be a good kind of aspiration, if you like. How to get rid of these obstructions that are hurting me and hurting other people, but try to get rid of them is not the way to do it. You have to understand them. So the Buddha had to understood Mara, understand what these things are first, to study them. And the fourth one is that when the Buddha did have this enlightenment experience, his whole perception of reality changed. Basically, it sounds a little bit simplistic maybe, but basically the Buddha realized selflessness. And I would say that actually all religions are aiming towards selflessness. They just have different ways of doing that. So the Buddha has his own particular way of realizing selflessness, that self is actually just a condition. We have what I would call a object-orientated consciousness. Is that too big? We're looking for things. This is still, I would say, a residue from the development of the self. The self begins to develop in relationship to an object, subject and object. There's food there, and if I scream loud enough, I'll get the food. So it develops this subject-object developing relationship, you see. The Buddha realized that, there is not actually an object of self. There isn't actually a self-object. It's just a process. It's all processes. There is in the mind, the eyes see an object, that's vijnana, and then sanya comes in and says, oh, it's that. Then sankhara comes along and says, oh, I can do that with this. So then it's just mental processes going on. And you think, oh, I am thinking. It's more like thinking's you. I think a thought, it's more like thought thinks you. When you begin to look at it and observe it carefully, but most people don't give a lot of attention to what's actually going on in their mind. They just go through and following this old habits of self, if you like, which are based upon ignorance. The root cause of our suffering is basically ignorance, not seeing clearly. And I think even the word in English, ignorance, is a noun, and it comes out of when we keep ignoring reality, ignoring the way things really are, then we gain the habit of ignorance then. Just don't want to see it, don't want to see it. So then developing the spiritual exercises, particularly mindfulness and collectedness, kind of changes the habit of ignoring, so it changes the habit of ignorance then. begin to see more clearly. There's in the Thai forest tradition, they talk about satipanya, mindfulness and wisdom. And the wisdom comes from mindfulness, clearly seeing. There's not learning things in books, but from seeing clearly. That's the real wisdom, rises from there. So this is all based upon, the Buddha's, first of all, the Buddha's approach, his own experience, his own and the approach, and also the cultural condition of India at the time. So at that time in India, there was a belief in, still is today, and now maybe increasingly in the West, there's an understanding of the principle of karma or karma. And this is something which also people have a lot of misunderstanding about. If you look in the most dictionaries, they say that karma is fate, which is not correct. It's not how Buddhism uses it. But the word karma or karma means action, means doing, making and doing. It's the active part. Of course, there is implied that action gives result. If you do some act, you get a result. Okay? And many times people then, they conflate, they put the two together. So they say, oh, it's just my karma. What they mean actually is it's the results of my previous action. Okay? But then you put them both together and then you're stuck with it. Whereas if you look at, or make a clear distinction between the action and the result, there's a space there. Action and result. And I would say it's only a potential result. The potential is like your action creates a sort of energy in a certain direction. But the Buddhist view of it is you can act again. You can act now. If you have enough awareness, recognize, oh, that action I did was very unskillful. I can act more skillfully and divert the potential result of that in a different way. You can't really stop it completely. The action already sets already potential movement and energy in motion, but you can change it. You can divert it. So like there is probably the most dramatic example was in the Buddha's time was the murderer Angulimala. Apparently was this. I never met him, but I just have to listen to read the stories about it. There was this murderer who was cutting off people's Anguli finger. This little finger? Are you sure? He had 999 of them, so it must have been a little finger. And the Anguli means the fingers, and mala is the mala bead, you see. So it was a finger necklace. So he wanted to get 1,000 people, kill 1,000 fingers. And then his mother's come to see him, you see. So the Buddha saw this in his deep meditation. Oh, he's going to kill his mother to get the 1,000th finger. And killing your mother is a very severe karma, has very severe karmic consequences. If you kill your mother or your father or shed the blood of a Buddha, then you can't be enlightened this lifetime. Very serious. So anyway, the Buddha recognized he has to save him. So the Buddha went to him, and make a long story short, he converted him to Buddhism, and this murderer became a monk. And people saw him there in the crowd of monks, meditating peacefully. It's him. Buddha said, it's okay, he's an arahant, it's okay, he's harmless. But he already killed all these people. But the only consequence was, because he was an arahant, was that one day he was out in alms round and he got hit by a rock. Somebody threw it at a crow, apparently. So he still got his karmic retribution from all the murders, but it was so minor now because he was an arahant. If he hadn't been so enlightened, he would have gone down to the deepest hell realm, so to speak. I guess, this is all hearsay, of course. Makes a good break in the talk, though. People were dozing a bit. But if you believe that the karma is fate, then you're imprisoned by all the previous actions you've done. Huh? If you have to, you can't change it. You've already acted. You've already acted in this lifetime, for example, and maybe in previous lifetimes. How can you get out of it? But in this lifetime, especially to developing the spiritual exercises, which are very, very wholesome karma, very skillful action, the possibility then to divert the previous results into a very skillful end, if it were, rather than have a detrimental result appear to us. Just the very fact that if you have more deeper meditation practice, then some of the even the actions we've done, which may lead to, say, physical pain, you can relate to them in a more peaceful way. Some of the Thai ajahns, they experienced a lot of for sickness, for example, but they could just use meditation practice, their deep samadhi, to deal with the pain of their sickness. And if they didn't have that spiritual development of meditation, they would have really suffered. But part of the process of spiritual practices is that we gain some insight into the selflessness of the body and the mind. So it's aiming towards complete selflessness, but in the process we recognize, this body, I see this, I can begin to observe this body as a breathing process, chemical processes, rather than taking it so personally. As this, I have complete control over this body. I don't. I have to let it go to some degree and just allow the body to be responded to by the weather, by the food, by the fatigue or whatever. Just the way it is. But otherwise, I shouldn't be tired. I shouldn't be cold. I shouldn't be tired. I'm only 75. I shouldn't. Wake up. It's perfectly normal. It's very, very humbling, of course. You have to accept some selflessness there. Okay. It's not really me that's tired. It's just 75-year-old guy. Body. We have to see that directly. So basically, the Buddha's giving us an opportunity that, very simply, the principle of karma is ethical cause and effect. That is, cause and effect as relates to our actions. And our actions, the Buddha divides into, very simply, into skillful and unskillful. And this is not just an Asian thing. I think all religions have this belief, don't they? You do good things, you go to heaven, right? You do bad things, you go to the hell realms after death, you see. The only problem is with the Buddhist teachings, it doesn't just end with the next birth. It goes on endlessly until you reach the end of suffering completely. But it's very hard to, first of all, the Buddha said, the results of action are one of the unthinkables, unknowables. There's this, we're acting all the time. Most of the time unconsciously, through body, speech, and mind. Behind it, the Buddha defined the karma in general as intention. Do you know what your intention is? Intention, will, volition. What do I intend? We usually act and say, why did I do that? Where did that come from? And all of our actions are they're just compulsions. Compulsions, sometimes referred to as being an emotional reactive syndrome. We're reacting out of old patterns. You know, you're afraid of something or other because you had a fright sometime, you know, maybe 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 50 years ago. You're still frightened about something. Yeah? And because you don't recognize it, you don't recognize that as a, you know, something which is an old habit programmed into us, and you feel unpleasant because you're frightened, and then you dump on somebody else. You know, don't do that. What did I do? You know, it's your old stuff coming up. but you don't know how to handle it. You don't even recognize. Oh, but if you're more conscious of some of these particular patterns, the basic patterns, of course, greed, aversion, delusion. I would put fear under delusion myself, because we're frightened what we don't know about. Yeah. But these are the very basic kind of actions or reactions of human beings. Greed is reaching out for, aversion is pushing away, and delusion is confusion. Don't know what to do. Paralysis. It's like fear is a paralysis, isn't it? You're frightened. What's happening here? I don't know what's going on. What is it? When you can recognize what it is, oh, it's not a snake, it's just a stick. Oh, laugh at yourself. After being many years in Thailand and then even in England, I went to live in New Zealand. And I go back to my hut at night up the track, up to the forest with my torch. You're looking for snakes, you know. Mm-hmm. It was programmed into me. And one day I realized there are no snakes in New Zealand. Mm-hmm. What am I doing? Looking for snakes for? There are no snakes in New Zealand.
Not even one.
Not even one? Not even one.
How can we show?
I think they have snake police even, you know. There's one time in Auckland somebody found a snake skin in a garbage can. It was in the national newspapers. Yeah, there's a snake loose in Auckland. There's a snake loose. There's a snake skin there. And they had it in the national newspapers. And then somebody admitted, I threw it out. It was in my. I brought it from Thailand one time with an old snake skin, and I threw it out in the garbage. And but not the snake, just the skin. Anyway, finally I realized there's no snakes in it. I turned off my torch, but then I tripped over the possums, of course, you know. At least they aren't poisonous, they're just messy. But the point is that when we understand that these challenges in general, they're just processes. The processes have been programmed into us. You don't try to get rid of them per se. We have to understand them. They are part of ourselves. They are us, whether we want to admit it or not. Greed, aversion, delusions functioning in here because of certain attitudes I have, certain things drives I have, like craving and ignorance. Ignorance is the basis of not seeing the way things are, and it's acted out through craving, and it causes all kinds of complications in our life. But you can't get rid of them, but you understand them, and then you can live with them. I mean, sometimes it is when you understand them, they resolve, because they're only there, held in place, because of your ignorance. It's like there's a whole process of development. It developed from very small impulses. Irritation becomes aversion, becomes anger, becomes rage or something. Wherever you catch it, back, and the ultimate source, of course, is in the self. It's in grasping the self. And so ultimately we have to come back to the very sources of where the self develops. And this can be done. The Buddha has given enough exercises in the collectedness, clarity, that we can refine our awareness, refine our mind to begin to investigate the very sources of this. So it all comes back to ourself again. So you're just trying to, kind of divert all the problems. All the problems are out there, It's not from me, anger, you make me angry, No, that stimulus just stirs up the anger in you. The anger is here, not there. Is that okay? Yeah. You can receive that? Not insulted? You aren't embarrassed? You aren't frightened? I would be. It's all in me. Oh. All this unpleasant stuff is in here. I like to look at my, generosity and kindness, but greed, aversion, delusion. Maybe not right now. Maybe later. I've got more meditation under my belt, then I'll look at it. But recognizing that, and there is this, the principle of karma is just like it's an impersonal law of the universe. It's like gravity. Action gives result. But the Buddha refers to it very subjectively. We do the action. Part of us does the action. Our will or intention. We want something. We want one of the fundamental will is towards the will for survival. So I don't know. I've read some books about when people are under really stressful conditions. How their personality can really change. Because they're desperate. They're down to a survival level. They almost become animalistic in their drives. For survival, for warmth, for food. It can become very, very aggressive, very, very cruel. It's like just like an animal, really. We're back to our basic instincts. But when you can observe that and recognize that, this is just a drive, an impersonal drive. This is beyond the self. But I can use the self now. The Buddha said, in the Buddhist teaching, we don't have free will. We have a choice, the Buddha said. We have an element of choice, but not free will, because most of our action is conditioned, preconditioned, as it were. Even I just read recently some psychologists, they say that our personality, we take to be ourselves, is 50% DNA. 50% DNA. So that's what we inherit from our parents. It's already conditioned, it's already settled. 15% is our early upbringing, which we have little control over. When we're young children, what kind of environment we're in, whether we're punished severely or we're acted on very kindly or something. This has got a bit heavy on the parents. Whether you can brainwash your children to becoming a Buddhist or not. And 35% is the actions we do the rest of our life. So you can say we have 35% free will, if you like. Make our own choices. But 65% is already pretty well conditioned. By the time you got enough awareness together, 65% of your life is already conditioned. The patterns you picked up from your parents, even the DNA you picked up from your parents, already there. But we still have a certain amount of choice, 35% choice, 7% chance of choice to decide what we're going to do now with our life. There's an element of choice. It doesn't seem totally hopeless. Of course, some of us have more work to do than others. We all have the potential, at 35% to be enlightened. We just have to work at it more, that's all. But it's always, a possibility is there, we can change for the better. First of all, to know what the skillful and unskillful are. That's why the Buddha gives us, the Eightfold Path, the 8 qualities, skillful qualities, factors of awakening, the spiritual powers, these positive things to look at in your life. And they are things which, every human being is capable of. The eight qualities. It doesn't include, I'm a superhuman, I'm a superhero, It doesn't mean you're born in a certain country, doesn't mean you have a certain race or anything. You know, it depends upon, just your own initiative, really. And being aware of that, first of all, know what the skillful, what the unskillful is. And there's a universal pattern through all religions, all societies, right? Refraining from killing, from stealing, from sexual misconduct. The Buddha adds some extra ones, refraining from lying, intoxication, because the emphasis of the Buddha's teaching, of course, is to have a clear mind and to be truthful. If you aren't truthful with yourself, honest with yourself, you're wasting your time. You got to look at yourself and be honest with yourself. Yes, okay, maybe I have a little bit of greed, aversion, delusion, but I'm well on the way. It's okay. and clarity of mind. Intoxication tends to, for some people, it tends to make them unconscious, distort their consciousness, not having a clear mind. So how can you see the truth then? If your mind is muddled. Yeah. Of course, there are some people, they ask me, so, but what if there are some drugs that make you more clear? The problem is that usually they're very short-lived, and because the experience is not well grounded, it is a bit exceptional. How can you integrate that? So some people who do take a lot of drugs, they're really prone to having psychotic episodes because their insight, their clearer seeing is not well grounded in life, not well balanced. So if one is using meditation practice and building up a very good foundation of collectedness and clarity, for example, then when the insights come, it's coming into a very stable and very wholesome place, not just popping out of the blue. There was a humanistic psychologist years ago, and he did studies of people who have what he called peak experiences, the kind of exceptional experiences of, you say, for experiences close to selflessness, and they really had a powerful change of attitude. But interestingly enough, most of them didn't want to have it again. Very, very hard to integrate into their life. Yeah, there's one lady I met in England, and she had had such an experience when she was young. Went up for a walk in the garden, and just suddenly, beautiful sunny day, and she was one with the garden. She just lost her sense of the self, and it was just beautiful butterflies and flowers, and then she kind of fell apart. She came back to normal. Oh, what? Am I crazy or what? yeah. She so she couldn't talk to anybody. How can you get that in perspective then? That kind of experience. Was it something I drank? Am I sick? Am I going crazy? What? But and then she came to talk to me, and I said, "Oh yeah, happens all the time." I said, It's called a samadhi experience. No big deal. Well, not all the time, maybe, but maybe for some people. But the Buddha has a context for it, you see. There's a context for those experiences. Just, we would say, a moment of samadhi. Samadhi, deep concentration, the subject and the object come together. And then your sense of self and the object dissolve, and a unitary consciousness, and they're just seeing and no seer. You forget yourself. Yeah. And, okay, then you come out of it again. Okay, back to the cushion. Let's go to the next trip. But that's very temporary. So you can always come out of it again. So, but then you recognize the processes involved, and perhaps possible to dwell there more often then, without it being so exceptional. But usually, we come out of it, especially maybe some drug experiences, you come out of it and then clunk right back to yourself, and you have even more problems now. How to sort that out, and my ordinary life. So anyway, the challenges we face, of course, are multifaceted, but having the right attitude to them, when we begin to work with them, then we can have perhaps a wiser approach and get some deeper understanding of what they're all about. So that's why I think the first time when I was given the theme for this retreat, this series of talks was, getting how to say, working through or something. No, it was overcoming the challenges. Yeah, we don't overcome the challenges, but we work through them with wisdom to understand them, if you like. Yeah, rather than trying to get rid of them. Here it is, I'm trying to get rid of my hindrances. But the hindrances is you. How do you get rid of the hindrance, which is you? That's like it's got an emotional way of cutting off your arm or something, If you try and get rid of something within you, even the unpleasant aspect, then you either end up suppressing it, or you become more dissociated from it. You just distort your perception because it's still part of you until you see right through it. That it's a process, an impersonal process. So easy to say, yeah, but now we get down to the practice for the next month, 3 months, 2.5 months. So I think I should pause there for now.
Andamayang Dhammavargataya Sadhu Karandharama Say Sadhu, Sadhu, Sadhu Anmodan.
So any questions?
I am prescribed Ritalin by my psychiatrist. I wondered your thoughts on that as a hindrance, perhaps.
Hindrance.
Yes, I mean, sorry.
No. I don't know the word. Sorry.
It's like when you have ADHD.
Oh.
Yes. So, often I've wondered if I should just take myself off of it and see if I can be effective in life without it. But I'm afraid of that. I'm afraid of being stupid and useless. But yeah, I just wondered if you had any view on whether that might interfere with the process in some way.
Yeah, it's hard to say what these chemical interference, chemical influences are. Yeah. Like for some people, even taking coffee maybe can be have detrimental effect because they're getting artificial energy out of it. You see. But I mean, you have to see for yourself, and maybe you have to have a talk with a doctor to find out what, like some things you can't stop. There was somebody in a monastery in New Zealand, and I gave a talk about the 5 precepts one night. It was in the daytime actually for the Asian people, and I mentioned about intoxication. And she was taking lithium, I think it was, and then she said, "Oh, I'm taking a drug. I have to, if I live in Montserrat, I can't take drugs, you see, drink the drugs." So she went on for lithium. And he got stranger and stranger and stranger. 3 days, after 3 days, he started putting monk's clothes on and walking around, So finally he realized something is unusual here. So, fortunately it was a monk. She came from a European country, and her English wasn't very good. So course, there was a monk there who spoke the language. So he talked to her and he said, well, for her, not taking the drug is intoxication. No. Don't take it too literally, you know. So, I mean, it requires, I think, in general, spiritual practice requires some degree of, say, calm and stability of the mind to be able to observe carefully, you see. So if, whether it's created by the meditation exercise, that's ideally, because you have control over it, and you can recognize, how to, deepen it or whatever, But if it requires also some medication, then it becomes a necessity, to be able to get some perspective on it, what's behind it. On the other hand, maybe it could be useful to try to experiment a little bit, reducing the amount or whatever, something, just to see what you're capable of. You don't have to go, totally off it maybe, but just reduce the amount and then see if there's any major change or something, and check it out. Check it out for yourself, because like I say, each person is different too. Some people maybe they need it just to maintain their own level of sanity or calm or stability in their life or something. For others, maybe their life changes, their life situation changes, their understanding changes, and then they don't need so much, or don't need it at all, maybe. Leave a supply ready for us.
There's actually some at the post office waiting to be picked up. My new mother has sent it along for me.
It's important that we have enough clarity ourselves to know. If it's kind of interfering with our clarity, then it's kind of a double-edged sword. Is it really this? Do I really feel better, or am I just imagining it? But check in, if you notice it, over a period of time, that seems to have stability, then okay, this increasing chance that you're right. Take some testing out of it, testing, I guess, over time.
Very difficult to evaluate your own state of mind, isn't it, really, sometimes? Because when you're in a different state of mind, it changes, the perspective changes.
Yeah.
So you can,
But if you increase the quality of mindfulness, we say, sati, attentiveness, mindfulness, it's not a conceptual knowing. It's like seeing really clearly through all the possibilities and the perceptions and stuff and the distortions, and this is really how it is. And you got to be, like I say, honest with yourself too, and check it out over time and in different situations, and just like the developing calm meditation. Really, it's exploring the whole experience of calm. There's all different kinds of calm. Use one word, but there's all kinds of varieties. I mean, even the Buddha referred to the 4 or even 8 absorptions, for example, different levels of calm. But even just in the ordinary sense, there's all kinds of different kinds of calm. There's some kind of calm that's really stodgy. Your mind is calm, but there's no energy in it. There's no clarity. And this, maybe this is what Ajahn Chah would say. This is the kind of, calm of a water buffalo or something. Not to insult water buffaloes, but hopefully none of them are listening. Other times the calm is very energized, and maybe it's not so deep, but your mind is still clear, and it's very active and bright, but not scattered. And you can see these different kinds, study these different kinds of calm. What kind of calm now is helpful for insight? And usually the stodgy one is not very, not very helpful for insight. It's you know, it calms your mind down, but without the clarity, it's not very clear. So you have to see, you know, insight is vipassana, is clear seeing. So if you're not seeing very clearly, then it's not really insight. I remember when I was in Thailand a few years ago, we had a kind of a wave of dengue fever in the monastery. So I got dengue fever, and it's terrible headache, you know. But and anyway, they were well. They warned that old people and young people die, but I wasn't old then. Well, too old anyway. But after it was over, my mind was so quiet, so peaceful, but it was so dull also. And then I began to wonder, this maybe the dengue fever, the fever killed my brain cells, you know. I was walking around, you know, back to my cave up in the mountain, sort of, in the days, you know, so peaceful, just like I was floating, you know. And I get worried. Hey, wait a minute. This is very, very peaceful, but this is not very clear, not very sharp, you know. But gradually it faded away and went back to my usual busy mind. And I was happy. Yeah. That was very weird experiences. Dull mind, you know, like brain dead, you know.
Peaceful and not happy, huh?
Yes. Yeah. No, water buffalo feel. No thinking, oh, wonderful. But where's the grass? Where's the grass? So like one of the exercises in developing mindfulness is to be aware of states of mind, you see. Make a conscious effort to be aware of them. And the Buddha points out, I think he pointed in the exercises, 16 conditions of mind, states of mind he points out. Just in general, I mean, there's not just 16 states of mind, there's 1,000 states of mind. But these are sort of greed, aversion, delusion, freedom from greed, aversion, delusion, and then there's a exalted mind and a depressed mind or something or other, and then there's the scattered mind and this collected mind, and just in general get an overview of the possibilities in the mind. I mean, for me, if I say state of mind, you know, I mean, here I am looking at my mind. Who do I look at, or what do I look at? Okay, is there any greed there? Is there any aversion, any delusion there? Is the mind exalted, or is it kind of contracted, or depressed, or something? Or is the mind scattered, or is it collected? And okay, I get a bit of now I can get a bit of point of reference here within those parameters, you see. And you get a bit of a sense for it. And you can become clearer and clearer. You study it in a more diversity and more detail. Just like learning the basics of a language, maybe. You learn the very basics, and then you can expand on it, you see. But most of us, we don't pay much attention to the state of our mind. You know, we just, unless it's really problematic. I'm really confused, or I'm really angry or something, but most of the time we don't bother to look at it very carefully. So.
When they talk about a one-pointed mind, if you're talking about having a mind focused on an object, is the idea that once the mind is really one-pointed, it can't actually have more than one focus. Well, because I'm focusing on an object, and I'm thinking, okay, focus on the breath for 5 minutes or whatever. But whilst that's focusing on the breath, although it's kind of focusing on the breath for 5 minutes, other things jump in and then go back. Is it just is it an oscillate? Is that's oscillating? Presumably, it's not really sharply focused. It's just on and off, but very rapidly. It seems like it's one thing, but there's actually 2 or 3 things going on, and they're just jumping around, are they really?
So you aren't one-pointed.
So it's not really one
You're
point.
10-pointed. Yeah, pretty obvious answer to that question.
Yeah,
Yeah.
But the idea you can slowly go on
Yeah.
meditating and then thinking about what you're meditating on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
But you keep going like that, and eventually you can
Yep.
spend more and more time on the one thing.
Yeah. It's a bit like focusing the camera, I would say, you know. You keep focusing, experimenting, you know. And then if you keep up with it, you don't feel frustrated and give up and whatever, you keep focusing, trying to do that, eventually it will come into focus. That's also what, you know, a characteristic of mind. It can be trained, you know. So I mean, sometimes it takes effort, and usually the older we are, the more you have to work at it. I mean, I think the little children, I mean, I forget what it's like to be a child, but I mean, you know, you can just see them how they focus on something very easily, get absorbed into it. You know, and you got to hello, wake up, you know, they're just lost in it, you know, very easily. But adults, many of them are the opposite, you know, they can't really focus on anything very long.
Is that because the mind sharp, right?
Mind is
Sharp,
where, who?
the kid or
Well, they just have less things in their mind to occupy, I guess. Yeah. They don't think about a lot of things. They don't have to worry about a lot of things. Yeah. So I mean, when an adult, for example, in the average time, you have many things in your mind in the background, right? Oh, tomorrow I have to go there. Next week I have to do this. Or the child, no tomorrow, no yesterday, just right. Food, fun.
I saw James always lost in the movie.
The movie, James.
James
Yeah.
always, if he watch movie, he doesn't. In the movie, he like focus so much.
But maybe it's also in his job too. Huh? I mean, sometimes the jobs, you have a very high focused job, you see, you have to look very carefully at things. Yeah. There was one man who came to retreat years ago in England, and he had really good focus ability, natural ability to focus.
Yeah.
I asked him what his job was, and he was repairing televisions. And all day looking at little wires in the television, you see.
Yeah. He the design.
And very
doesn't have
details. He's training his mind like that all the time, you see.
to- I think
Yeah.
maybe makes sense.
Yeah.
Because he got so focused, he can't do multiple things.
Mm, yeah,
Can only do one thing, but good.
yeah,
in that
yeah,
thing. So
That's-
can you do this? I can't. I can only do one thing. You want me to turn on the remote, or you want me to do this?
So he does samatha and you do vipassana. You do multitasking and he does one-pointedness. Make a good couple.
I remember when I was at school, I'd zone out the window rather than listen to the teacher.
Yeah.
Just go into this zone until the teacher would chuck the duster at you.
Yes.
You go bang, oh.
Yes, yeah.
But it was almost like single point of concentration. Right?
Yeah. Absorption.
Yeah.
Absorption and not thinking. But you couldn't control it so well, huh?
No.
Yeah.
It just happened, you know.
Yeah.
Bored with the lessons, I just signed out.
Yeah. That's been for most people. The attention is taken from them. You see, it's taken away by things.
Mm.
They don't actually apply their attention to something. I mean, unconsciously, like the breathing, the attention is taken away by interesting things or noisy things, or things that will distract them away. They find interest in, taken away, and they lose the ability to control their attention then. So the Buddha is teaching us to get our control back again, to focus the attention.